I wasn't born with a silver spoon. In fact, the closest I came to wealth growing up was watching my mother clean other people's mansions. My name is Kay Donovan, and before the suits, the headlines, and the boardrooms, I was just a kid from a forgotten street in Detroit, counting coins to buy bread. Back then, my father was a ghost, left when I was 7. My mother worked double shifts, and I sold candy in school to keep the lights on.
I didn't complain.
Struggle wasn't a visitor. It was a roommate. But I promised myself something every night while staring at the cracked ceiling. One day, I'll make sure no one I love ever has to choose between heat and food again. The drive inside me was relentless. I wasn't smarter than everyone. I was just obsessed. While others partied in college, I worked 3 jobs and coded late into the night. I slept in my car some nights, showered at the gym, and used the university library like my second home. That's when I met Leah. Leah wasn't like anyone else. She was studying literature and worked part-time at a bookstore. She noticed me sleeping on the common room couch once and handed me a sandwich without saying a word. She didn't pity me. She respected the hustle. We clicked, not because we were perfect, but because we were imperfect together. After graduation, I had nothing but a laptop, a cluttered notepad, and an insane idea: a digital logistics platform that could revolutionize small business shipping. Investors laughed. Friends doubted. Leah didn't. She believed in it, even when I failed 3 times. We got married in a courthouse on a Wednesday. No wedding dress, just her in a blue dress she wore to job interviews. I told her, "One day, I'll buy you the world." She just smiled and said, "I only need you." But ambition is a double-edged sword. I became consumed with building TrackRoute, my company. Success started to show up, slowly at first, then all at once. Investors came back. Clients signed. Money flowed. I was finally winning, but at a cost I didn't see until it was too late. I missed anniversaries. Skipped dinners. When Leah told me she was feeling distant, I said, "I'm doing this for us." When she cried herself to sleep, I told myself I'd fix it later. But later never came. One day, I walked into our penthouse, and she was gone. No note, just a set of keys on the marble counter and the echo of silence. I called, texted, drove to her sister's place. Nothing. She vanished. I spiraled. For weeks, I went through the motions like a machine. The company became everything, and Leah just a memory I couldn't escape. Friends told me she probably found someone who had more time. The tabloids speculated divorce. No one knew the truth. I'd pushed away the only person who loved me when I had nothing. Years passed. TrackRoute went public. I became one of the youngest billionaires in the logistics tech space.
But all the money couldn't buy peace.
And despite everything, I never stopped loving her. Then, one cold Saturday in November, fate brought her back. I wasn't supposed to be in that neighborhood. My driver had taken a wrong turn while trying to avoid downtown traffic. I saw the old Maple Avenue Café, a place I remembered Leah mentioning once years ago. "Best apple pie in the city," she had claimed. I told the driver to stop. I walked in alone, craving something familiar in a life that felt increasingly hollow. The bell above the door jingled. It was warm inside, smelled like cinnamon and strong coffee. Then I saw her.
Leah.
She was behind the counter, wearing a faded apron, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She looked thinner, tired, but still beautiful in that effortless way. She was laughing with a customer, her eyes creasing the same way they used to when I told bad jokes. I stood there, frozen. She hadn't seen me yet. Then he crawled out from behind the counter. A toddler. Curly dark hair. Hazel eyes. A small, mischievous grin. And in that instant my world stopped. Because that face, it was mine. You said. I must have stared for a full minute, unable to move, my heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. My brain tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe the boy just looked like me by sheer chance. But then he giggled. That same dimple on the left cheek I see in the mirror. That same squint when he smiled. Leah used to call it my secret smirk. There was no denying it. He looked exactly like me. Leah finally noticed me. Her eyes locked on mine, and I saw every emotion hit her face in a split second: shock, panic, sadness, and something else, guilt. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for a glass behind the counter, pretending to be composed. But I knew her too well. "Hi," I said, my voice low, uncertain. She swallowed and gave a hesitant smile. "What are you doing here, Kate?" I couldn't answer that. Not truthfully. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't ready for this moment. "Just passing by," I muttered. "Saw the place. Remembered you liked it." She nodded. "Still do," she said, glancing at the boy, who had now plopped down in a booth, playing with sugar packets. I gestured toward him. "Is he?" Her jaw tensed. She looked away for a long second. "His name is Eli." "Leah," I whispered, the word catching in my throat. "Is he my son?" She didn't answer with words. Her eyes filled with tears, and she simply nodded.
Once.
$1 billion couldn't prepare me for that. Not the boardrooms. Not the late-night negotiations. Nothing. I just stood there, robbed of breath, trying to process the truth. I had a son I never knew existed. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice cracked, more pain in it than anger. Leah sighed deeply and leaned on the counter, avoiding my eyes. "Because you were gone," she whispered. "Not physically, but mentally, emotionally. You were married to your company, Cade. I tried to reach you for months before I left. I cried in our bed while you typed emails next to me. I begged for time, but there was always a meeting, a deadline, an investor dinner." I didn't interrupt. I couldn't. "When I found out I was pregnant," she continued, "I didn't even know how to tell you. I was scared. Scared that you'd see him as an inconvenience, a distraction from your empire. And I couldn't let our child grow up feeling unwanted." Her words landed like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. The truth hurt because I knew she wasn't wrong. I started. She looked at me, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Would you, Cade? Would you have paused long enough to listen? Would you have looked up from your laptop long enough to see me standing there?" Silence. The cafe buzzed with quiet chatter and clinking cups, but to me, everything faded into the background. Just me, Leah, and the weight of the years between us. "Can I talk to him?" I asked, my voice trembling. She hesitated, her maternal instincts kicking in. "He doesn't know who you are." I never said anything. I didn't want to confuse him. "He's only 3. I want to know him," I said firmly. "I need to." She studied me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Okay. But no big introductions. Just say hi. Be gentle." I approached Eli slowly, knees weak like I was about to walk onto a stage for the first time. He looked up, curious but unafraid. "Hey, buddy," I said softly. He smiled. "Hi. You playing with sugar soldiers?" I pointed to the packets in his hands. He nodded excitedly. "This one is the boss," he said, holding up a blue sweetener packet. "And this one is his helper." I chuckled, a lump forming in my throat. Sounds like a good team. He offered me one. "You can be the other helper." I took it like it was the most precious thing I'd ever been handed. "Thanks, Eli." He smiled at me, then went back to playing. Just like that. No expectations. No grudges. Just innocence. I sat across from him for a while, letting it all sink in, watching him laugh, speak, move, seeing pieces of myself in him. I'd missed his first words, his first steps, his first birthday, and somehow I had to live with that. Later, as the cafe emptied and the afternoon sun dimmed through the windows, I turned to Leah. "I want to be part of his life," I said. "Not just a visitor." She looked uncertain. "Cade, our lives are different now. You're a billionaire. You live in a world full of cameras and chaos. This is all Eli knows. It's quiet. It's safe. I don't want to take him away from that," I said quickly. "I just want to know him. Spend time. Earn back the place I lost." She didn't answer right away. "He deserves the truth," I added quietly. "And so do I." Leah finally nodded. "Then you show up. Not once. Not with gifts or grand gestures. You show up every week. You keep showing up. No cameras. No drama. I will, I said. I promise. As I left the cafe that day, the wind biting against my coat, I realized that of all the fortunes I'd built, this was the first time I truly felt poor. Poor in moments, poor in love, poor in time. But for the first time in years, I also felt something else.
Hope.
The following Saturday, I returned to the cafe, no chauffeur, no entourage, just me in a plain jacket holding a small paper bag of cookies from the bakery down the street. My stomach twisted with nerves, like I was walking into a board meeting with no presentation, no agenda, just raw truth. Eli was already there, sitting in the same booth by the window, legs swinging under the table. He looked up as I entered, that same playful light in his eyes. "You came back," he chirped. "I promised I would, didn't I?" I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "People promise lots of things," he said, suddenly wiser than his age. I blinked, surprised. "Yeah, they do. But I don't break promises anymore." He looked at me curiously, then reached across the table. "Want to see my drawing?" "Of course." He unfolded a crinkled sheet of paper, revealing a picture of a tall guy holding hands with a smaller kid. Both were smiling under a crooked sun. I didn't have to ask who they were. My throat tightened. I'd missed 3 birthdays, 3 Christmases, 3 years of drawings like this. "You're a great artist," I said, swallowing emotion. He grinned. "Mama says I'm going to be an inventor." I glanced at Leah behind the counter. She caught my eye and gave a small nod. Not approval, but a beginning. That became our routine. Every Saturday, I'd show up, sometimes with puzzles, sometimes with stories about animals in space or maps of the world. We talked about his dreams, his favorite cartoons, and what superheroes he liked best. He didn't know I was his father.
Not yet. But he trusted me.
And that meant everything. One morning, weeks later, we sat on the floor of the cafe after closing time, building a Lego tower together. Leah was sweeping in the background. Eli suddenly asked, "Do you have a son?" The question caught me off guard. "No," I said carefully. "Not yet. But you'd be a good dad," he said simply. "You listen a lot." I looked at him, at those wide brown eyes that mirrored my own, and all I wanted to do was pull him into my arms and say, "I am your father. I've always been." But I couldn't, not yet. Not without Leah. That night, I stayed behind after he went home with her. Leah and I sat across from each other, the silence stretching between us. "He's starting to ask questions," I said gently. "I don't want to lie to him." She nodded slowly. "Neither do I." I could see the weight of motherhood, the burden of silence, etched into her face. "Why'd you never come back to me?" I asked suddenly. "Not about Eli.
Just you."
Leah's eyes glistened. "Because I didn't want to be someone you remembered out of guilt. I wanted to be whole on my own." I started over. Got a job, made mistakes, fell down, but I stood back up. And I wasn't part of that. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I leaned forward. "Leah, I'm not the man I was when you left. I lost you because I thought success meant never slowing down. But now I realize the real success is being present for the people who matter." She looked at me for a long time. "Words aren't enough this time, Cade. He needs consistency. Stability. No champagne fairy tales.
Just you."
Quiet, honest, steady. "I'll give him that," I said. "I'll give you that." The next Saturday, I brought a children's story I had written just for Eli. It was about a little boy who lived in a lighthouse and a man from the sea who visited him every week, bringing stories of treasure and stars. In the end, the man tells the boy he is his father, and that the treasure was never gold, but time spent together. Eli loved it. He made me read it 3 times. When we finished, he asked, "Is that story real?" I looked over at Leah, who had been standing nearby, listening. She gave the faintest nod. "Yes," I said softly. "It's our story." Eli blinked. "You mean you're my dad?" My heart pounded. "Yes, Eli, I am." He stared at me, lips parted. Then slowly, He crawled into my lap and wrapped his small arms around my neck. "I knew it," he whispered. I held him, tighter than I'd held anything in my life. And in that moment, the hole that had been eating at me for years finally began to close. The next few months changed everything. I rented an apartment nearby, nothing extravagant, just a quiet place with 2 bedrooms and a small balcony where Eli could keep plants. We started spending weekends together. I took him to the science museum, taught him how to ride a bike, watched him fall asleep during movie nights.
He called me Dad now.
The sound of it never got old. One rainy Thursday, Leah invited me to Eli's school play. He was a tree. Didn't speak a word, just stood there with a cardboard trunk taped to his shirt. But when he spotted me in the crowd, his eyes lit up and he gave the smallest wave. Afterward, I found Leah waiting near the parking lot. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I wanted to," I replied. "Every moment counts now." She smiled faintly. "You've changed." "Because I had to. For him. For us." She looked down at the umbrella in her hand, then up at me. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "That we'll fall back into old patterns. That one day, you'll disappear again." I stepped closer. "I disappeared once. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I promise you, I'm here now. And I'm not leaving." Rain dripped from her hair, her coat, the edges of her eyelashes. And for a second, the past didn't matter. Just the now.
She reached for my hand.
And I knew we were starting over. Not from scratch, but from truth. The leaves had started to turn by the time everything felt like a rhythm, like life had finally found its beat again. Autumn in our little corner of the city was golden, crisp, and honest. Eli had taken to collecting fallen leaves, pressing them between sheets of newspaper to preserve their magic. I started doing it too, not because I believed in magic, but because he did. And maybe that was enough. One Friday evening, I picked him up from Leah's place. She opened the door, a smile tugging at her lips. She looked softer these days, the weight in her eyes lighter. "He's been waiting by the window since lunch," she whispered with a grin. Eli ran up, backpack bouncing behind him, arms stretched out. "Dad." Every time he said it, it still knocked the breath out of me. We drove out to the edge of the city, where a quiet piece of land overlooked a river. I had recently purchased it, not for business, not for development, but for us. It had an old wooden cabin and a fire pit, and I told Eli it was going to be our weekend spot. A place with no phones, no suits, no meetings. Just stories and stars. We roasted marshmallows that night. He fell asleep curled up beside me under a blanket while I told him about how, once upon a time, a man thought he had everything until he met a little boy who taught him what everything really meant. Leah came up the next morning. She brought breakfast, and we sat on the porch in silence for a while, watching the river bend through the trees. "He's different now," she said softly. "Happier. Stronger."
"He's got you," I said. "He always had you."
"He's got you now, too." I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I let myself hope again, not just for Eli, but for us. There was still love there. It never really left. It just got buried beneath ambition, ego, and time. A few weeks later, I invited Leah and Eli to a gathering at my company's headquarters. It was our annual community outreach event, charity drives, youth mentorship programs, scholarship announcements. I had started these a couple of years earlier, after realizing that wealth meant nothing if it didn't lift others too. I wanted them to see that part of me, the part that had learned, finally, that leadership wasn't barking orders from a glass tower. It was serving quietly, humbly behind the scenes. Eli was fascinated by the stage and the crowd. He even stood next to me as I gave my speech, holding my hand. "There's someone I want to thank," I said into the microphone, my voice steady. "He's 3 feet tall and has already changed my life more than any deal or dollar ever could. My son, Eli, showed me that success isn't about how far you climb, it's about who you hold on to when you get there." The applause echoed through the building, but all I could hear was his little voice whispering, "That's me." Afterward, Leah pulled me aside. Her eyes were glassy, but she smiled. "You've become the man I once believed you could be." "I just needed a reason," I said. And I found two. From that day on, everything shifted. Eli started spending half the week at my place. I learned how to braid shoelaces, make pancakes from scratch, and recite bedtime stories backward, because apparently that's the fun way. I also learned how to really listen, not just to him, but to Leah. We went to therapy together. We had hard conversations. We faced the past instead of pretending it didn't exist. And slowly, something began to bloom between us again. Not from nostalgia, but from forgiveness. One Sunday morning, as we walked through the park, Eli darted ahead, chasing pigeons. Leah and I followed behind, arms brushing occasionally. "You ever think about trying again?" I asked, cautious. "With us?" I nodded. She looked up at me, her voice low. "I've thought about it every day since you came back." I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Weeks turned into months. The seasons changed. And one quiet evening, as snowflakes danced through the air, I knelt on one knee beside our son's favorite tree, the same one we had pressed leaves from back in autumn. "Leah," I said, voice trembling, "we were broken once. But look at us now. Not perfect. Not easy. But real. You gave me the greatest gift I never knew I needed. A second chance. And I want to spend every second proving I deserve it." Her eyes filled with tears as she dropped to her knees and kissed me. Eli squealed behind us, completely misunderstanding. "Is this a group hug?" "I want in." We laughed and pulled him close, snow dusting our hair, our coats, our lives. That night, as I lay beside my family, I realized something powerful. Success didn't come from escaping your past. It came from facing it, owning it, and transforming it into something beautiful. I used to measure my life by deals closed, stocks gained, titles earned. But none of it ever filled the quiet ache in my chest. Now, every time Eli tugged at my sleeve, every time Leah laughed at my dumb jokes, every time we watched sunsets from the porch of that riverside cabin, that ache was gone. I still wore a suit during the week. I still ran a billion-dollar empire. But I made sure to unplug every evening. I never missed another bedtime story. I never let another Saturday pass without pancakes, puzzles, or a walk through the woods. I had everything I ever wanted, but more importantly, I finally wanted everything I had. So to anyone watching this, chasing success with all you've got, just remember, the real victory is never the money. It's not the mansion. It's not the power. It's the moment a little boy says, "Dad," and you finally feel worthy of answering. And that's a legacy no fortune can buy.